How's it going? Yeah, I said it before. Quite enjoying this box. Trying the Chords out this time after having found the Chords machine to be really nice sounding. I was just thought, you know, I'm sure it's not, and it's not. So, which is great. Some real kind of sort of Damon Wild. There was a record I had years ago which I foolishly sold. The rotary organ 12-inch by Damon Wild, like an old probably was maybe 96, maybe 96. I think I bought it after Joe Beltran Place's album, which was 95, I believe. So 96, 97 maybe. Sine Wave, the New York label, if I'm correct in remembering names, which I'm typically really shit at. But yeah, you know, Google it on YouTube or search for it on YouTube. Yeah, really cool track. It's just from memory, it's like a 909 workout with just this organ, kind of grinding organ sound just over and over and over, and then it basically fades the organ in, has some distortion, fades the organ out, fades it in again, and the record ends. It's just such a cool record. I remember the B-side being a bit more technical, which this is probably in between the two. But yeah, like Motorcycle is really gritty, really heavy, like dark sounding stuff that comes out of it. You're not going to get this on the rhythm easily, if at all, actually. I'm kind of curious to kind of go back into the FM synth section within Rhythm, which was like an update they added, just to see if we can kind of get even close. But I know in my heart of hearts that having played around with it, we're not going to get anywhere near. So kind of sad by that, really. But you know, the different boxes, I kind of wondered yesterday how different that we might perceive this box if it was kind of in the sort of more kind of like higher budget packaging that Elektron put their kind of Digitact and Syntact and all their other tacts and the rhythm and everything else with the kind of extra buttons. It probably would be, I don't know, the kind of cuteness of this package. It almost doesn't represent the sounds that you can kind of get out of it. And maybe that's, you know, where I was kind of being a bit misled there. I definitely am someone who kind of judges a book by its cover. Maybe we all do, but yeah. If it looks really good, and not that this looks bad at all, because it's really well designed. If it looks really good, if I'm kind of attracted to it, visually, then that kind of makes it kind of sound different. Or even if it sounds different to what it looks, sometimes that look just sort of transforms. And so I'm kind of curious whether the Motorcycles is going to start to look a little bit more gritty. But you know, we got some. I mean, this is my partner's stickers, but we got some cute little birds up here. And they come with lots of different stickers and yeah, it's just, but it sounds nasty. It's such a great thing. So in terms of what I've got, like both the tracks are using the Chord machine, and I'm kind of been experimenting with different ways to kind of put in notes across that sequence, compared to say like the rhythm. Like on the rhythm, you can, sort of like 101 style, just like tapping the notes, and it kind of fills up the sequence, and you can't do that on this. But I've been sort of like, I've used the pitch before, as it was recording through and just wiggling around. This time I just went step by step using the how do I get to that menu? Oh yeah, I've got to hold it down. Using the notes here, so just sort of like basically going through a note at a time, and I was just kind of going to the extremities. So there's some kind of high ones and then some low ones and then some, none of this is like in any key or scale, and I think it's just completely based on ear. So and then getting some notes in, and then picking different what do they call it on this? They call it on, I think it's on the color one. Here it is, like the chord shape. So just kind of like trying to find one that works, and then just sort of playing around with the coloration and the sweep and contour, just to kind of get these, particularly the sweep. I think the sweep has got some different kind of I'm not really sure. Again, like I might have said this in a previous video, but I'm not really sure what it's doing, which kind of, I don't know, I find that a bit, I wish I did, because it doesn't really educate me to, other than kind of using this box, but it would be nice to kind of, I don't know, I mean, maybe, well, let me finish what I was going to say. It'd be nice to kind of be able to like understand like what's kind of happening there to make that sound the way it does, so then I can maybe anticipate it a little bit more, other than just sort of turning a dial. But then, you know, maybe that's not important, because you're probably just going to turn a dial if you want it to sound that way, right? Maybe, but I kind of find I like to kind of take some information from one box and kind of put it into another one, and maybe I'm doing that because this sounds kind of like the sort of stuff I do anyway. So, but I guess I'm wondering if this was like my first box or something. How would I kind of learn these sorts of things? But, you know, I don't know. It's not my first box, so maybe I'm just thinking too much, as usual. But yeah, this sweep thing's got some interesting stuff on it. So if I turn this back up, get these kind of chordy, like the more kind of like organ-y kind of chords. And it's also got some fixed, like I've got some fixed parameters on a few of them, probably quite a few of them actually. But then, so you've got this kind of consistent rhythmic sort of in frequency content that just kind of happens on those steps, which means you can kind of move the other ones around them. So you've got some consistency of the pattern, so it's not just turning the dial, because that's something I found with this one. Just turning the dial and just gliding through kind of sounds a bit, you know, it doesn't quite work the same way as you might with, you know, a filter or something. It kind of just sort of feels like it meanders a little bit, which in some cases is fine. But I found for this sort of more sort of hard kind of techno rhythmical kind of stuff, having some consistent fixed ones and then kind of moving the other ones around it, you can kind of lift it up and lower it down, but you've still got the punctuation. So particularly on certain chords that are like punctuated, they can still come through when it's sort of sweep down. This, I mean, again, it's the term for the sweep down. What does that even mean? But when you sweep up, it sort of, it just seems funny saying like I'm cleaner. When you sweep up, yeah, it sort of sounds brighter, right? It's all clean. It's all clean and sparkling. Let me show you what I'm on about. So yeah, you get that kind of, particularly those high ones, you get that real kind of nasty, that's a nice, glassy, you know, someone's just stamped down on the keyboard. Like that's quite cool. You know, it's quite nice. Yeah, and then kind of the same thing with some of the ones, but I guess they behave a little bit differently. So I guess the chord, I mean, do you know what? It probably says what these bloody do in the manual. Again, I don't read the manual, so the chord color probably like shifts the frequencies and the fundamentals, because it kind of sounds like it's doing that. That's the other thing. The rhythm does this. I imagine most Elektron boxes do this, but where you fix certain parameter locks on each trig, it kind of glitches out when you're trying to move past it with the same parameter. So if I'm kind of like, if I've got the, you know, a color fix, so I'm guessing I must have, because it was kind of glitching. Yeah, there we go. So it's glitching out. When you're kind of moving around, moving the color parameter around that point that it's gonna lock it, you get this sort of like judder or jolt or kind of slip to try to compensate where it should be, because it's like, am I supposed to be, I'm assuming this, am I supposed to be where the encoder is, or am I supposed to be where it's locked? So I think it tries to I think the lock always wins would be my guess, and it tries to sweep down from that point where they cluster. But if you kind of keep wiggling it, you might have seen it in some videos, just kind of wiggling around that point. I'm just trying to get it to catch, so it just sort of falls down into where it should be locked, but it falls from different points. So let me show you that. So you can kind of hear it's kind of like a snappy kind of like a short like envelope or something, which pardon me, which I quite like. Yeah. So but the rhythm does this as well, but I don't think it does it quite as smooth. It kind of sort of pops. So this one seems to be really smooth in the way that it does that. So I wonder if that's something they've kind of like tweaked on, you know, like the later machines or something with the Syntakt, or, you know, like whatever else does. Maybe every machine, maybe the rhythm's the one that glitches. I don't know. So I'm kind of, but I've not really played around. I've played around with that kind of idea a little bit in the rhythm, but not as much as maybe I should have. And I wonder if it's just the kind of you know, this is digital and the rhythm's kind of analog, so it's always gonna. I wonder how it deals with that kind of what do they call that? Interpolation. Yeah, so digital has obviously got potentially an edge on that, maybe I'm sure there's some digital stuff within the rhythm, like to control. Well, there is obviously to control some of those things, but yeah. So that's kind of like the track 2. So track 1, see, I'm trying to remember where the volumes are. Track 1 was a little bit more of a sort of, remind me of some sort of underground resistance sort of meandering stuff that they did probably more on the second, but probably more so on the third one. That album that's got like, you know, like lots of sort of, you can hear the album kind of, if you've not heard it, do check those 3 the X101, X102, X103, that's what I'm thinking of. If I've got that right, I think I've got the numbers, but you know the ones I mean. And if you don't, just like, you know, Google X waveform transmissions and underground resistance and all that kind of stuff, it will come up, I'm sure. But like the second, but mainly the third one, there's a lot more of a kind of album concept in there, and I might be wrong, but I think maybe the lineup was more Jeff Mills on that. I'm not 100% sure. I don't tend to try to remember these things very well, but it definitely had a sort of like framing, whereas say that the first one was really kind of like that 90s, early 90s, maybe even late 80s kind of hardcore kind of sound, and it was sort of like slow and industrial, you know, even like an old Public Enemy kind of feel to it in some places. But yeah, that later sound that had this sort of sound designy thing, Robert Hood does it as well in some of his later stuff. And you can kind of, it's not like I sort of thought, oh, let's make that. It's just as you're kind of playing around with those sort of, you know, I don't know what you call it, like sort of techno 16-step or whatever sequences, and trying to get like these kind of, you know, almost arpeggio-like kind of patterns. Sometimes it just doesn't sound as rough and ready as you want it, and it kind of has this sort of slightly delicate texture. And this one kind of had that, but it was a bit like relentless. It just kind of kept going. So I basically put an LFO on it to play around with the volume. So it's listed as distortion, and so I'd always skipped it, and then I was looking for the volume one, so I'm assuming it is that one. It's strange that they put it as, you know, distort as opposed to vol, which would probably make sense. You would know that if it goes up it distorts, but yeah, just to kind of give it like a kind of wobble across like its own kind of sort of pattern. I don't think it's reset, yeah, so it just kind of runs at its own pace. So I have been playing around with this on the other one as well, like the resets and the phases and the fade ins and the phase, just to kind of with different wave shapes, just to try to get like things catching. I think track 2 is using the square, and then reset, and then got some ways that the kind of parameters just move and change, and just specifically at that point that the square kind of disappears or catches, you get these little sort of glitches where it's having to deal with the pitch in quite extreme ways. But yeah, on this sound that we're listening to now, it's a bit more of a smoother deal. So you've got this kind of like glassy sort of kind of thing. And mainly the thing I was doing was the sweep. So you get that sort of like a reference to the more nastier, edgier sound which is on track 2 in the sweep, in this sort of sound, but still kind of glassy. So it sort of has that meandering kind of ambient-y sort of thing. Yeah, so I kind of really like that. You can kind of play around with it, and it sounds cool as it is without having the other stuff. I definitely, I quite like, you can imagine like a rhythm under that, or some kind of like performance of the, maybe on the mixer, which, or kind of exploring effects or whatever. Also, making use of the undo button. I don't really know off the top of my head, because I don't use it, what the shortcut is for undo parameter changes on the rhythm. I know there is one, but I very rarely use it because I'm always kind of like wandering around and using the sound and the patterns to just sort of take me in any place. But the fact that this one comes up with a little, undo, I was seeing that and I was like, oh cool, I can undo, but I just, I wasn't reading it, and then I thought, I wonder if it's this button, and it was. So it's nice. It's nicely intuitive. This, I think they've definitely, they've done a good job in those kind of crazy button combinations and kind of condensing that down into something a lot more accessible, which I think is cool. More music making and less scratching your head and hitting up forums and saying, why does my rhythm sound dull? Why does it sound so shit? Well, this can be a lot of reasons, but this does the trick quite quickly. So I quite like this thing. So stuff like that where that, well, maybe you don't know, right? You don't anticipate it, but just I'm getting to this motor skill habit of just having my finger on that undo, and I think that thing that I was mentioning in previous video of certain knowing kind of what the parameters are going to do, and it's probably going to change like per machine, to have that confidence to like want to turn stuff, because it really wants to be played. But to know like, oh, I want to turn this and it's going to sound okay or not sound shit, just having your finger on that undo button, I'm finding really, really helpful. So I can just, it's like, oh, it's changing pitch, maybe I didn't want to do that. And I can just bring it back rhythmically as well. So it's sort of, and it kind of jumps back quite well, I think. So I'm not sure how long it stays in the undo. So what we got, 46. And I'm guessing after a while it decides this is what you want. Yeah. So you've got like a short window there, but I guess you can just keep wobbling it until until you've kind of like feel safe, until it feels safe to let go of a dial. But yeah, I guess that's the nature of encoders, and then their application being applied to who knows what, depending on the menu and things being updated and whatnot, versus like a fixed encoder that's always going to do the same thing. So there's that. And then also with the chord shape, you can just go into these different. It reminds me of like that whole space sort of techno thing that kind of happened with all that Detroit lot being fanatical about space travel and comics and whatnot, mainly Mills, I guess. But just that kind of like detuning things, and then it's sort of like the transformation of your experiences through through space and through different planets. I find, I mean, obviously I probably wouldn't have thought that at all ever had you know what I mean, had I not had some artists kind of tell me that's what their music's kind of referencing. So yeah, interesting. Although having just done that, there's a whole load of 60s sort of sci-fi stuff. Like I grew up watching Lost in Space a lot, although that was a bit later than the 60s, I would think, because it was... Oh, actually, that's a good point, because it was initially black and white. And when I say Lost in Space, I'm not talking about the one with Matt DeBlanc or whatever his name is from Friends. I'm talking about like that really awkward family where everything was seemingly painted in with luminous pens when it went from colour. But the early Lost in Space episodes were in black and white. And also a lot of those old sci-fi films, I forget, I'm just shit with names, but like Forbidden Planet, probably, maybe. There was one with a big robot that walked around that was pretty naff, but lots of sexism in it, as you can imagine. Women being needed to be rescued by men with perfect hairdos, but there was some. But my point being, it was lots of like analog synths and stuff that were used to kind of create those sounds. So even the shit ones, even the really cheap films. I mean, the good ones look cheap to be fair, but even Doctor Who, if you can watch that stuff. I mean, I don't mind the early ones. My brother's a big Doctor Who fan, but I think I checked out when it went colour. But yeah, like that kind of spacey sound. So it seems to be, in everything that's sci-fi, you've got these kind of spacey bloop sounds, and I can see where Mills probably got that idea from. It's kind of like, what else? This is the sound of the science fiction future, right? Because obviously we've surpassed many of these dates that we would have. Yeah, where's my hoverboard? I don't know. Yeah, it's quite cool though. So that's the bulk of it. The only other thing, briefly, was, as always, I reduced the length quite a lot in all the steps. I find like having them really short and then just kind of turning decay up a bit, and then I can kind of adjust the lengths independently just to give it some movement. But these are all like really, really short, and then just kind of using the decay. Otherwise, there's this sort of feeling of everything being sort of like glued together, like the sequence is just glued together, and you don't just get any space around it. I'm finding anyway, especially if you're kind of knocking up the tempo, which this one is a bit high. Feels pretty slow though, right? But yeah, that's it, I think. I can't think of as anything else that was particularly mind-blowingly new that I just sort of discovered. I'm definitely finding my way around the menus a little bit more. Maybe the buttons are starting to give a little bit more. Maybe it's just me getting my feel for it, but yeah, it's pretty cool. It feels like there's a lot of effort that needs to be pressed on the buttons, and then a very delicate amount that needs to be on the dials. So I'm finding that a bit like I need to get used to that, but and it's, I've got a sturdy desk, so I'm not going to push through to the people downstairs pushing these bloody things. But yeah, I think that's the bulk of it. I'm gonna try and do some more videos, and I'm enjoying it. So we'll see what I can come up with. Nice one. Cheers.